Thanks for joining us today, friends. Joining me on the line is our regular contributor, Rory, and our buddy, Peter from SGT Report. Good morning, fellas.
Hello. Good morning.
And on the line, our very special guest for this hour, Claudio Grass, Managing Director of Global Gold in Switzerland. Claudio, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You sound great. How is life in Switzerland? And tell us a little bit about Global Gold, will you?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, life is good in Switzerland so far. Also, we are facing quite some pressure, of course, from the United States government. When you looked into the last discussions about FATCA and, the banking secrecy and all that stuff. As you said, my name is Claudio Grass, and I'm basically the managing director of Global Gold. So we are a company that is, first of all, we are convinced that possible more than ever an allocation of parts of one wealth towards gold is key to long-term wealth preservation. And so we basically came up with this solution. So we are offering clients from around the world a solution that affords high security storage of precious metals outside of the banking system in the format of their choice under their direct and unencumbered ownership. Basically a solution that is addressing all possible threats which are linked with a potential crash of the actual monetary and financial system.
Now, you've said, Claudio, that confiscation is already here by inflation of the money supply. Physical gold is the antidote against this ongoing global debt crisis. Where do you stand, just real briefly, on silver, for those of us who are silver bugs?
I think silver, when we look at the historical ratio, at the moment I think silver is 6 times cheaper than gold. A lot of silver has been consumed in the industry. So on the long term, I'm very bullish for silver as well. I always tell, investors that they need to understand silver because it's much more volatile than gold. So it going up and going down heavier than in general, the gold price. But at the moment I heard from the Swiss refineries that now also the silver market is spiking up again, and that there is a lot of physical movement taking place at the moment. So it's coming back because it has been a bit quiet in the last few weeks and months. But now it seems that it's going much better again.
Yeah, we wonder if we're breaking the suppression chains of the big banks like J.P. Morgan. Finally, our guest today is Claudio Grass, Managing Director of Global Gold in Switzerland. Peter, what was your question for Claudio?
Yeah, Claudio, this is from your July 2013 article, Living Marx's Dream, and you talked about the 10 Commandments of Communism and how they're playing out in Europe and the United States right now. And as I read through that list, it was just chilling when I saw that in those 10 Commandments goals such as a heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax, abolition of all rights of inheritance, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital, extension of factories as instruments of production owned by the state, and free education, or we could call it indoctrination, of all children in public schools. And I know people like you and I, Sean and Rory, are trying to reverse these trends and move closer to free markets. But my question to you is, where do you see Europe and the United States headed in the next 5 years? Do you see us going closer to these socialistic kind of ideas, or are enough people beginning to wake up where they're going to start saying no to this Marxist garbage?
I think the points Peter was mentioning out of these 10 points, I think all these points are somehow implemented already. And especially when you look at taxation, for example. When 1930, the average taxation was around 10% in the Western world. Today, we are facing between, depending on the country, 40 to 70%. So, for example, here in Switzerland, when I look into when I look at what I have to give up for taxation, and government redistribution, healthcare, pension, everything mandatory, basically by the government, then it's 50% also in Switzerland for the average Swiss person. So this means Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning we are working for the government. In Germany, they are working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the government. And I think that basically shows, when the fruits of your labor, if they are confiscated by 100%, then we are talking about slavery.
That's right.
And so, only when you look at these figures, then, of course, I think, the future, right now, what we have seen since 2008, basically, it's astonishing. No, that never happened in history before. That every country on this planet, every central bank basically was printing money and debasing the currency. And the funny stuff is that all that money basically goes into the financial markets, or maybe real estate markets as well, and of course into bonds, because the government can use this financial repression and can basically steer the amount of money into certain asset classes they are preferring, but it doesn't go into the real economy. You look at the unemployment rates, for example, in the Eurozone, especially when you look at the young ones, below 25, then we are Spain, Portugal around 50%, and then it's basically going down to 30%. So the real economy, I think in the future, I don't see economic growth in the Western world. And this will lead, at the end of the day, the question is, does it lead towards even more totalitarian structures, or will the people start thinking about their private individual liberty?
Yeah, I think throughout the world we are seeing a pushback, a swing back towards liberty as people are protesting. The Keynesian school, the central planners. Maybe we should talk just briefly before we go to break here in 2.5 minutes about the Keynesian school versus the Austrian school. You had an awakening. Maybe you can tell people about that, but central planners claim to know more and can correct macroeconomic imbalances by manipulating market signals and market information. That's the Keynesian viewpoint. They can print money out of thin air and just paper over problems, whereas the Austrian school stands for private ownership, free markets, healthy money, and a free-thinking society, which is very much in line with liberty. How did you wake up to the idea of the Austrian school of economics?
Yeah, basically, I when I was in the Middle East, I took a book along written by Ferdinand Lips, and the book was called Gold Wars. So he was talking about monetary history and all that stuff. And so basically I got in touch with him, and he pointed me then out to, the Austrian School of Economics. So I started with Lübke and then to Friedrich August von Hayek, then Mises, Rothbard, and then I basically ended up with Hoppe and all these guys. So, learning more about, the Austrians, they are really, they are saying, savings and investments, that's the basis for a sound economy, not consumption and debt. And at the same time, as you said, the Austrian school is putting the individual into the center, and they will let him the pursuit of happiness. That's key in the Austrian school, self-responsibility, and you can do whatever you want to do as long as you don't use force against others. And go for it, don't betray, don't steal. Then we are back to the Bible, basically, the Ten Commandments. So it's and of course the other is exactly the opposite, Keynes, where a small amount of people basically can define how much money will be printed out of thin air, who will receive it, for which interest rate.
Well, you mentioned the Ten Commandments. For those who value the Ten Commandments, they're pretty simple rules, and I just want to remind our government of maybe 3 or 4 of them, one of which is commandment number 6, thou shalt not kill. The 8th commandment is an interesting one for the banksters to consider, thou shalt not steal. And number 9 is the one that really resonates with me time and time again, and it's this one, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. So when we see John Kerry, when we see Barack Obama, when we see these people get up in front of international cameras and say that Z is true when in fact XYZ is not true, it's a real shame, because they're not only breaking the Ten Commandments, they are leading us directly into World War III. Our guest, Claudio Grass, is on the line, and before I turn it over to Rory, who has some very interesting questions for you, I just wanted you to tell us how there's an initiative by the people there in Switzerland to get the National Bank to back up the currency with 20% gold, Claudio.
Yeah, that's correct. The good stuff in Switzerland, I think, let's go back to what will the future bring? I think we will see it with 2 indicators. One will be more centralization, and the other one will be more decentralization. So when the people understand that basically, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So even, everyone is looking for something else, and the tastes are different, interests are different. But if they understand that they have to start decentralizing the political system again, I think that would be a good indicator to see that the people are really looking for more freedom. If they just talk about that they would like to have this and that, but they don't decentralize their political system in their own countries, I think then that will be a system that leads to more totalitarianism.
Yeah. And, government is force, and government that is unrestrained and tied down is tyranny. It inevitably is throughout history. And, we know that to be true. Rory, I know you had some very pertinent questions for our guest about gold and silver. Fire away when you're ready.
Thank you. And it ties right into what you were just saying, Claudio. The first question I have is regarding the Royal Bank of India and the government of India coming out, just a couple of days ago saying that they want the Royal Bank of India to start purchasing gold from the citizens. And I'd like to get your take on that. I know that the rupee is completely falling apart and staring hyperinflation in the face. And just like to get your take on the reaction from what you believe will be the reaction from the citizenry and where you see this thing headed.
Well, what I heard about India is that they are smuggling more gold into India than drugs. So, which just shows, government intervention, basically, it cannot last. And, India, of course, the official sector, they increased 3 times the taxation on gold. So really the government don't want to have Indian people buying gold, so they have to smuggle it in, and when we look at the refineries, Switzerland is still, I think, the biggest refinery place for gold. Very interesting to see is that there was a lot of gold outflow, for example, out of UK, the big 400 ounce bars going to the Swiss refineries, and they basically made smaller bars out of it, 1 kilo bars and all that stuff. And that is going directly to China and India. Because what we have seen was in the last 5 months, for example, since middle of April, when the paper price of gold was hammered down, what we have seen is a spike in physical demand. The refineries, they have delays of 5 to 7 weeks because they just cannot deal with the demand. And so I don't know, with India, I just see that the gold is going into strong hands and is not with institutional or only central banks in the West, but it's really also going with the individual in the Eastern world. And this is basically a very good sign because they're going to hold on it and they will not sell it. And this just shows that, the Grisham law, basically, when the government compulsorily overvalues one type of money and undervalues another, the undervalued money will leave the country or disappear from circulation into hoards. Overvalued money will flood into circulation. And I think that's what we are seeing for the last 20 years already, the wealth transfer from the Western world into the Eastern world.
Yes, and you touched on my other question, which is regarding the Swiss refineries. And according to some reports that we were getting back in April, Switzerland is responsible for about 70% of the world's gold refinery. And we know that the gold was coming out of the UK and being refined in Switzerland and going into smaller bars. Is it a 5 to 7 week delay on all of the refineries, or what's going on with the refineries in particular with the 100 and 400 ounce good deliverable bars? What's going on there?
Well, because we as a company, we for example, we don't focus on 400 ounce bars because that's really, the institutional, or the central bank, bars. What I know is that the 400 ounce bars are coming in and they are being melted down into smaller units. And that's why you also have these, delivery delays taking place. And, I think this is, in general, situation. There is still, there is supply, we might see, when we see what we really have to distinguish is the paper price of gold and the physical, and what it means to have it physical in the format of the customer's choice outside the banking system. Because, the paper gold market is 125 times bigger than the physical market. So of course it's also like a fractional system. So they can play around with paper, and as long as the people are not asking for more physical delivery, of course it has an impact on the price. But I think in the future we're going to see, the physical demand is going to increase, and if the prices of gold stays that low as it is right now, what I consider as a buying opportunity is that mines are shutting down, so there might be a supply issue in the future. Let's say within the next 12, 24 months, if the prices of gold and silver are not going to rise.
Yeah, and I've got a question for you. And Peter, if you have a question, just jump in anytime. We've got 5 minutes here in this segment left, and then one final segment with our guest, Claudio Grass. Claudio, these are headlines. These are just the three most recent headlines we've posted at SGT Report from King World News. Art Cashin warns of massive gold short covering and contagion. Okay, here's another one. Former U.S. Treasury official Paul Craig Roberts says U.S. to experience total collapse. And this third one, which is really horrifying, it says, a terrifying collapse will plunge the world into total chaos. What is your position on those headlines, and do you think everything is really as dire as that?
I had once a guy told me, I think it was in 2006, when I thought, hey, the system is going to crash, the real estate crisis in the States will explode. And there was one guy telling me, listen, Claudio, it's all about people perception. I also believe when we look at the current liabilities and the unfunded liabilities, all the debts in the Western world, especially, it's unsustainable. At the same time, we have demographic data. So, in the Western world, we have less children, so people are getting older. You have less people paying taxes, and there is, a lot of the economy and the real economy has basically been moved to the east. So, it's not sustainable. It will lead into a collapse, because I also believe, governments are broke. Banks are broke as well. But as long as people don't realize that and still walking around accepting fiat money, and as long as this hyperinflation is not going to kick in, I think, it can stay on, for a certain while longer, because it's up to the people. And 98% of the people in the Western world, they probably believe that we are crazy when they hear talking us.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
So,
and I wanted to ask you about the people in Switzerland, because the people in the United States, with the exception of this informed audience, with the exception of probably less than 0.5% of the population, the people in the United States don't own any physical silver or gold. They just haven't given it any thought for generations now, at least two, probably 3 generations since back in the 60s when we actually had coined money made out of some silver. What are the people in Switzerland like? Are they more apt to own these precious metals for their protection?
Yeah, because, I think so. Because, we always had this Swiss gold frenzy. Which I do remember when I was young, basically when I had a birthday from my aunt, for example, then she gave me a gold frenzy as a present. We were on a gold standard until the end of the 90s, where we had in our constitution that the balance sheet must be, I think it was the money in circulation, that it must be backed up by 40%. Basically, as you might know, then in 2000, when we joined the International Monetary Fund, and when you joined the IMF, basically, it says that gold has no monetary value, and then the whole discussion came that Switzerland basically started selling, 50% of the gold reserves.
Yeah.
And now the people have seen that, because even the Swiss people, they know that some of them, they still know that gold is money, and that it's most likely better to have, physical gold than euros or US dollars on the balance sheet of the national bank, and that's why they succeeded in getting more than 100,000 signatories together to go for that initiative.
Yeah. Well, joining the IMF is a slippery slope into the abyss. Peter, did you want to weigh in, or should I ask a follow-up question?
You can go ahead.
My follow-up question was this, and think about it. You'll probably have to give us a longer answer after the break. We hit break here in about 1 minute, 10 seconds. My follow-up question is this idea of a return to a gold standard. Two schools of thought. One school of thought is that the gold standard is the only thing that can retie down these out-of-control governments and restrain spending, and back the dollar, back any currency on the planet so that the people are not raped by inflation, by out-of-control representatives, the printing press, central banks. The other school of thought, Claudio, is that the people just need to take the printing press back, because to return to a gold standard, as Bill Still has told us, would be the absolute worst thing we could do, because the richest of the rich people on the planet have all the gold. The Rothschilds, the wealthiest people on the planet, want to return to the gold standard, because it will be at that point that they will be able to have total control because they own all the gold. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I just want everybody to take this time to think about war with Syria, think about World War III, what it means to you, what it means to your family, and please take the time to pick up the phone and call your representatives and just tell them, hell no, this is enough, we've had enough, we cannot do this anymore. If we're a free people, we owe that to our children. Claudio, before we went to break, we were talking about the gold standard. Is it a good idea to try to return to a gold standard, or is it a fool's errand because the wealthiest people on the planet, like the Rothschilds, own all the gold?
Okay, well, first of all, people should be able to freely decide what they want to accept as money. So I don't believe that we should go to a gold standard. I think we should rather leave it up to the free market, and also free banking. And then, some of them will use, Bitcoins is also an interesting topic. At the end of the day, the people have to decide what they want to use as money. But I'm sure basically that gold and silver will be money, because they have been money always, for the last 3,000-4,000 years, since basically people started bartering. Gold and silver has been money, and that's decided or defined by the market, because it's a development, and people have freely chosen that. So as soon as you would go back to a gold standard, forcing people again to use gold, most likely then is a government involved or a central banks or whatever. We see what happened in the past. So I think we should the government has nothing to do with money, and therefore money needs to be freely for the market and for the market participants.
It's a great answer. It ties right into Rory's next question about free markets.
But maybe one remark regarding Rothschild and all that stuff.
Sure.
I don't believe that, there is still, there is plenty of gold, and so it's not within a few families only. I'm sure, of course, there will be some wealthy people and they still have gold, but it's not a controlled market, because that's what happened in the last. Look at the central banks. They sold gold for the last 20, 30 years, and this gold has basically disappeared somewhere in the market and ending up with individual, and that's what we can see also now in the Eastern world, because they have it in the culture. In the Arab, for example, in the Quran, gold is holy. Mm-hmm. And you have the same in the culture of the Asians, the Chinese, the Indians, the Arab world, and of course, especially these countries which faced, 3, 4, 5, 6 times hyperinflation in the last 100 years. So I think they most likely also go for gold. So I think gold is definitely not, it's not up to a few people who held everything.
And I think gold and silver have always been money and will remain money no matter what the people choose. Real quickly, because I do want to have proper goodbye for our guest, Claudio. Rory, your question about direct democracy. We've got about a minute here.
Okay. Can you give us an overview, Claudio? This is a term, that direct democracy is something that I was first introduced to by Gerald Celente. And if you could just give us a quick overview of how it actually works, and what I as a citizen how it would affect me.
Yeah, can it work? I mean, we have a republic. We're supposed to have a republic here, Claudio, as you well know.
Yeah, okay. I think direct democracy, of course, it can work. But as I said, the key is that you keep the structures, that you have federalistic structures in place so that you're limiting, for example, if we have 26 states within Switzerland, and maybe one state has 40 or 50,000 inhabitants, and and they used to be responsible for taxation, schooling system, social security system, all that stuff. And I think this is the key benefit of Switzerland, because that's why we are not so corrupted as the rest of the world. That's why we're not that much indebted or enslaved as the rest of the world, because we had these kind of structures limiting the power of the politicians. And so, yes, direct democracy can work, but keep the power as low as possible with municipalities or with, cities or stuff like this.
Well, I think it was just a joy to have you on the show today, Claudio. I really do thank you for your time. And before we lose you here in the next 75 seconds, can you tell everybody about Global Gold and the services you offer and how they can find you on the Internet if they want to protect some wealth from the fiat money machine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our website is www.globalgold.ch. And we're also writing quarterly reports per quarter, maybe a few reports, but more about fundamentalistic stuff. We are talking about gold. We're talking about the Austrian School of Economics. So we're trying to educate also a bit to bring our point of views. So everyone is welcome to sign up for the newsletters. And as I said before, I think Global Gold has been founded because we believe it's likely that the actual current or that the current monetary system is going to crash, and we believe that physical gold under the direct ownership of the client, stored in safe jurisdictions such as Switzerland, which is still respecting property rights,
right,
is key for wealth preservation.
It's critical.
And that's what we are offering.
It's absolutely critical. And thanks for tuning in to SGT Report. My thanks to Peter, Rory, and Claudio Grass from Global Gold. Gentlemen, you are the best. Thank you so much.